let me start with a question. How many leadership programs have you seen that promise transformation? You know the ones: transformational leadership, transformational culture, transformational change, where you attend the workshop, you complete the module, you download the PDF, and congratulations, you are now transformed. If transformation worked that easily, most organizations would be in licensed monasteries by now. Instead, many are just very tired offices with better PowerPoint decks. So today, I want to talk about why transformation is not the destination and why leadership doesn't fall where we think it falls. This sits at the heart of the eclectic leadership movement. Now, eclectic leadership doesn't believe that leadership comes from one ideology, one culture, or one shiny model imported from somewhere else. Leadership lives at the intersection of language, psychology, power, culture, and values, which means leadership is not something that you install. It's something you live through, and that's why we developed what we call the Trans-Fluence model, not as a linear change framework, but as a meaningful transformation model. So this is a repeating cycle, and there are 6 steps, and the first step is you translate, then you transfer, you transpose, you transplant, you transcend, and then you transform, right? That's the crucial bit. But more importantly, you need to understand that this cycle repeats, right? And here's the thing that most leadership models miss, and that most important part of this entire cycle isn't any of those words. It's what happens between them, these phases. That's where transition lives. The transition is the most important part of any transformation. Now, everything starts with translation. Before people change behavior, they interpret meaning. And you don't hear a leadership idea neutrally. You filter it through your culture, your history, your incentives, your experience, and your scars. This is why the same leadership message can feel empowering to one person and threatening to another. If we take the example of Microsoft's under Satya Nadella, when Microsoft started talking about empathy and growth mindset, the words traveled fast, but the impact varied. In teams where leaders supported the transition from old performance pressure to learning and experimentation, behavior genuinely changed. But in other teams, the growth mindset just became a poster on the wall, hanging quietly above the same fear-based KPIs. Same words, different translation, different transition. Next comes transfer. So once meaning is translated internally, it gets transferred. Training programs, leadership frameworks, town halls, vision statements, this is where organizations feel productive. So we've communicated it, we've rolled it out, we have cascaded the message. But let me be blunt. Transfer without the transition creates compliance, but not commitment. In the 2010s, half the corporate world adopted agile leadership, stand-ups, sprints, and post-its everywhere, but many leaders transferred the tools without transitioning away from command and control thinking. So agility looked flexible, but felt rigid. That's not a failure of intelligence, that's a failure of, again, transition. Now we reach the moment leadership gets uncomfortable. Transpose. This is where leadership ideas meet pressure, deadlines, hierarchy, risk, and real consequences. And this is where leadership often collapses. If we take the example of Nokia, before the smartphone revolution overtook them, Nokia was not clueless. The insight existed, the data, it also existed, but the transition from knowing to acting differently, that felt unsafe for Nokia. Middle managers didn't feel psychologically or politically safe to challenge assumptions. So behavior stayed the same while the market moved on. Now that wasn't an intellectual failure, it was a transitional failure. Now when leaders are not supported through the fear of acting differently, meaning evaporates under pressure. So if leadership survives pressure, it begins to then transplant. This is when leadership stops being personal and starts becoming the culture. Now, language changes, decisions feel different, and trust shifts. Everyone talks about copying Toyota, but what most organizations copy are the tools. What they miss is the transition required in leadership behavior, the humility, the respect for frontline insight, the long-term thinking. Without that transition, the transplant fails. Now, culture does not change because you announce it. It changes because people experience leadership differently, repeatedly, and over time. And then something interesting happens. Great leaders stop obsessing over models and they transcend them. They stop asking, which framework should I apply? And they start asking, what does this situation require of me? This is leadership maturity, not rigidity, and this is not improvisation either. This is judgment. But here's the irony. The transition from competence to wisdom is rarely acknowledged, let alone supported. We expect leaders to magically grow into it. Now, eclectic leadership says that's lazy design. Only now does transformation actually happen. And this is not dramatic. Transformation looks boring from the outside. It's consistency under pressure. Trust earned quietly. Influence that doesn't need announcing. And here is the big reveal. Transformation is not the end. It creates new responsibility, new complexity, and new leadership challenges, which means the cycle starts again. Across all these 6 phases, one truth becomes unavoidable because leadership lives in transition. The emotional, psychological, linguistic, and relational shift between one way of leading and another. Now, most leadership models ignore this space. They define the phases needed, they celebrate the outcomes, but then they abandon people right when the certainty dissolves. Because transformation without the transition is not development. It's abandonment, right? Now, the eclectic leadership movement exists to put transition back where it belongs, at the center, between the phases. Now, because when transitions are designed and supported and named, leadership becomes humane and sustainable and authentic. So, here is the takeaway, that leadership is not a big leap, it's a cycle of deliberate phases, right? And held together by transition. Now, and when transition is taken seriously, transformation finally means something. Now, if this resonates, don't chase the next shiny framework. Design the transition between each phases, and that's where leadership actually lives. And let's give it up. We're really trying to lead our lives and others in a world which is increasingly confusing, conflicting, and contradicting. You are struggling to lead with more clarity. You want to have meaningful connections, right? And you want to see the big picture. I strongly urge you to join the eclectic leadership movement. Think like an eclectic leader, which will guarantee you improved clarity, meaningful connections, and a confluence of all basic human values. That's what we urgently need in today's world, right? I'll see you in the next video.